Hello and welcome back to your Pennsylvania Dutch Minute. I got a question in my email inbox. I actually want to read the question to everybody. And it says, I'm going to leave the person nameless. However, I'm new to your channel and I have a question for you. How is it that non-secluded community, such as yourself, meaning the Pennsylvania Dutch, have managed to continue speaking Pennsylvania Dutch while not being secluded, as there is no real reason for knowing that language? I can tell you about myself. I'm Jewish, and for Jews, up until the 20th century, all European Jews knew the Yiddish language, but after the Holocaust, there was a mass immigration of Jews out of Eastern European communities and toward the United States and Israel, and the Yiddish language slowly faded away. And now only ultra-Orthodox Jewish communities who are secluded, like the Amish, have continued speaking the Yiddish language. So basically, how have you managed to continue the speaking of this language in such a different society? It's a long question, but it's a really honest question, and I think a lot of people really start to wonder about. First off, we always have to remember that there are people like me and a lot of other Pennsylvania Dutch who are not Amish that still speak Pennsylvania Dutch. Of course, among the secluded communities, as the person asking the question said, the language has been able to be maintained among the Amish, among the Old Order Mennonites. They cut themselves off and use the language as their main means of communication, Pennsylvania Dutch. But for those of us that aren't Amish or Mennonite or live in a secluded community, how in God's name has this language survived for 300 plus years here in the United States? And some of that has to do with our history. Even though we weren't a secluded community like the Amish, where we cut ourselves off, we were kind of a secluded community in the sense that when you look throughout the majority of our early history, 1700s, 1800s, the Pennsylvania Dutch people who were non-sectarian, so the Lutherans, the Reformed, the Moravians, all these groups, they all lived in the same geographical region of the United States, southeastern Pennsylvania, in those couple of counties that we consider Pennsylvania Dutch country today: Berks County, Lebanon County, Northampton, Lehigh, Carbon, parts of Schuylkill County, Lancaster County, parts of Bucks County, Montgomery County, Chester County. We were kind of regionally cut off from the rest of the United States, and we were able to maintain our language because we were dealing business with each other. We were functioning as a society together. Of course, English became a language that came into our society as well. Of course, we couldn't stop that. Now, granted, if you watch my YouTube channel, you probably think there's a lot of Pennsylvania Dutch speakers out there. Well, there are, but the vast majority of Pennsylvania Dutch speakers today who use the language regularly are your plain sect groups like your Amish and your Old Order Mennonites. People like me who grew up mainline Protestant with electricity, driving cars, with computers, video games. The vast majority of us are no longer using the language as a main means of communication, and I don't either, of course. English is my main language, but when I'm at home with my kids and my wife, and when I interact with family members, it'll be a mix between Pennsylvania Dutch and English. You can't shut out English. As the world globalized, looking at history, post-industrialization into the early 20th century, of course, globalization pushed the pressure onto the Pennsylvania Dutch language. And in the United States itself, of course, we hit our waves. World War I era, it was extremely difficult to talk a Germanic-based language, of course, here in the United States. Children were beaten in school for speaking Pennsylvania Dutch instead of English. My maternal grandfather had his nose broken by the teacher because he was speaking Pennsylvania Dutch in the one-room schoolhouse in early 1920s, northern Berks County, Pennsylvania. It's a difficult history to look at and think about how, we ourselves tried to beat the language out of us as we tried to push this idea of assimilation into the American society. And that would be a topic for a whole nother video. But the Pennsylvania Dutch, if we're anything, we're stubborn. And we survived both world wars. We have survived the 20th century, and yet there are still people, now granted it's a small population, that do speak the dialect, the language, that aren't Amish and Mennonite. And I think a lot of it has to do with our stubbornness and our pride. We're proud of our language. It's a part of our identity. And what really is refreshing for me is that since I've started this YouTube channel and have been doing this for a couple years now in my presence online, I am continually getting more and more and more emails and notifications and communications of people who want to learn the language. They feel that their grandparents spoke it, but they were cut off because their parents never learned it. It was never passed on them. They feel that they've lost a part of their identity of who they are as someone that is of Pennsylvania Dutch descent. And that really makes me feel good that there is this interest out there in our language. And it's almost like we're going through I'll say this, I think we're going through a little bit of a renaissance. Pennsylvania Dutch culture, our art, our food is becoming cool again. And I don't know if it was ever really cool, but it's becoming cool, period. You see it. It's being adapted. It's being utilized. People are saying that they're proud to be Pennsylvania Dutch. They want to buy clothes with Pennsylvania Dutch folk art on them or Pennsylvania Dutch phrases. They want to learn the language. They're interested in learning about our culture, our traditions, their culture, their traditions, their language. So I really think we are going through a rebirth right now, which is it going to be enough of a rebirth to bring Pennsylvania Dutch back up to you're going to hear it speaking on the streets in Reading? No, of course not. We need to be realistic. But I think it's a lot has to do with, the original question was how were we able to maintain it? Well, pride in who we are as part of our identity. Secondly, we were geographically, with each other. We were never forced to flee. We never had a diaspora like the European Jews did. We never had this massive event that forced us to break apart and move. So that's part of it too, a big part of it. We were, for generations, an agrarian society. So we stayed on the farm. We weren't moving away. We were landlocked in that sense, I guess. These are all things, and there's probably been tons of PhD papers, dissertations written on this. I can't quote any right now. But I would love to get the conversation going. If you have an idea why you think Pennsylvania Dutch has been able to maintain itself for so long, when so many immigrant languages in the United States really only typically last 1 or 2 generations from the person that came here, how has Pennsylvania Dutch been able to maintain it? Do you agree with me? Is it because we're stubborn? Is it because we're proud of who we are and we didn't want to give that last vestige of who we were up? Or was it just, it's a personal choice? We chose to maintain our language for the most part. What are your thoughts? Please put them in the comment section down below. We'll get a conversation going. I'm not going to prognosticate as to what the future will hold for the language, but I'm going to stick by the comment that I made that I really think we are going through a renaissance or a rebirth in interest in all things Pennsylvania Dutch. And I think we need to embrace it. And I think we also need to, those of us that know our Pennsylvania Dutch stuff, whether it's the language or we know our culture, our traditions, or our food ways, to spread that out and spread it to other people, because you might be surprised how much interest there actually is out there. What a great question. I don't know if I really answered it. I kind of pontificated a little bit on my thoughts on it. But if you have an idea about it and want to join the conversation, please do. If you have an idea for a future video, email me, of course, and we'll get that queued up for a future video down the road. Please check out my website, padutch101.com, for more Pennsylvania Dutch stuff. Subscribe to my podcast if you're looking for some good, honest conversation, Doug's Front Porch. It's found anywhere you find your podcasts from. And also, if you would like to financially support my endeavors here, follow the link down below at Buy Me a Coffee. And all money donated will go towards upkeep of the channel and hardware, software, all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to spend it on anything other than related to this stuff. I love all of you for your continued support and future support of everything that we're doing here. Be proud of being Pennsylvania Dutch. Speak Pennsylvania Dutch. Practice your Pennsylvania Dutch. And until next time, Mock Scoot.
Mock